Clarity Seminars program has gotten quiet because we're doing much, much less because no one's in the office. Think about it. They used to fly us out to the office to train. There's nobody in the office. Everybody's working from home. It's been slightly odd. So I'm only saying that because, oh my gosh, I'm standing in front of live people. You guys have legs. Who knew? You know, you're on Zoom, all you see is this. Good evening. A lot of people don't like the front row. I did a big class, about 50 people in the class or something, and the whole front row was empty. So I removed all the front row seats, and I stood here. And now everyone who was in the second row is now in the front row, and I got a lot of this. So I only did it once. But it was an interesting experiment. They wanted to be in the second row. So I won't do that here. Okay, should we start? Okay, very good. And if anybody else comes in, the door's open, I think. So I wanted to start with just a few more general comments about Swami. For many years, I would think that he was doing things for the community. I lived up at Ananda Village, that he was doing things in the community and that he sort of had this plan. But I came to see over time that it wasn't planned. I mean, some things, of course, were. But he would just do what Master told him to do. So he tried to be just open all the time. And sometimes things would happen that looked not good at all, and then they would land in a place where you go, wow. And you'd have the natural thought, how did he know? And I think he didn't. You do what you hear when we work on quieting our own likes and dislikes. Then we can really hear God's subtle voice. And I could see him really trying to hold that space all the time. If you were in the woods with a friend of yours, and that friend had much, much better eyesight than you, okay? And your friend suddenly said, oh no, and ran away, what should you do? Run. Now, you can't see what he sees. I don't think Swami, sometimes he did. I mean, I don't want to exaggerate it. But very often, I'm pretty sure, he didn't see what Master had in mind, but he heard what Master said. And if Jesus comes to you and says, turn left, you don't go, yeah, why? You just turn left. So he had that constant state of openness, which for me made it really more fascinating. The second aspect of it was even then, he would get that guidance and you could see him feeling it. This is very subtle. And I was so impressed. I've worked very hard. You know, we all have our different approaches to the path. Every Ananda person is a little different. You know, you do this, you do this, you do this, the different, not just the techniques, but your whole your whole vibe for the path. Guidance is extremely important to me. It's how I really tried to live my life. Quiet the likes and dislikes and really want to know what God is saying. But even Swami, I saw how careful he was with his guidance, which also was very interesting for me. So I've really learned a step at a time. People get guidance and they put their fingers in their ears and off they go. But it's 24/7. So you get a feeling of something. You know, like I'm supposed to do this thing. Don't just rush ahead. Take a step towards it. How does it feel now? Then you take another step. How does it feel now? You see what I mean? And I could see him working with it. In some ways, he seemed sort of not open to feedback. And what I learned over the years, it was the energy he wasn't open with, too. If my energy was right when I spoke to him, he was like this. But if my energy was off, he didn't want to hear from me. But it's not that he didn't want the information. He didn't want to encourage my bad energy. So keep those things in mind a little bit as we go through the evening. We're going to share a lot of stories. I assume, I hope, maybe, that most people here either have the book or have at least read the book. So there are stories that I can refer to in there, but we'll go over them a bit anyway. So I think we'll start with Anaya. She's going to share a bunch of stories. And then whenever she's finished, I'll come up here and do the rest.
I'm an enthusiastic writer. And writers are not always enthusiastic speakers. So I'll speak for a while, and I feel just blessed beyond measure that I'm married to an enthusiastic speaker, because he can come up and rescue me whenever I get into trouble. So yeah. So just out of curiosity, how many folks have read some of this book, either the physical book or the digital? Okay, good. How many people never got one of these? Raise your hand. Good, because we have a few extra, and I want to make sure we get them to you. So catch us afterwards. Wonderful. So I'll start with just a couple of things. I really wanted in my life, and that's probably true for all of you, there came a point where I desperately wanted training, spiritual training on the path. And I'd gone as far on my own as I could, and I just had a desperate desire to have a spiritual teacher. And that desire brought me first to master, and then through some remarkable stories, which we won't go into all of that here, but once I found master, within a year, master took us by the collar and dragged us across the United States and deposited us at Ananda Village. And it was like, wow, it was a revelation to move from Philadelphia to Ananda Village in the space of about 3 weeks and just completely give our lives to the spiritual life in that context. I had read Swami's Path, and I was absolutely thrilled to imagine that there was somebody physically present who was a disciple of Master's who I could learn from and train from. So I immediately just, whatever he was doing, I tried to be there, and whatever he had to say, I wanted to know. So I extremely opened myself up to be guided by him, and that inward call, I'll just read something from my book about that, because that's true for all of us. If we make a strong call, he will show up. Somebody will show up to help us out. I'm not sure if I have the page, so I'll just pass on that. So anyway, my first experience with Swami, though, was a little surprising, and I think it was a test that I had to pass. I went to watch him give a talk. I was so excited, my first time seeing him ever. We'd been at the village for maybe a month, and so we sat in the audience. We couldn't wait, waiting. A guy came out on stage, and he was moving the mic a little bit, and he sat down, and then he started to speak. And he wasn't wearing an orange robe like the man on the path, the book that I had bought. He was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and shorts, and he looked pretty casual. And I thought, oh my God, is that Swami Kriyananda? And it turned out it was. So he's talking, he's got a beautiful voice, as you know, so I began to just be so happy to be there. And then he started doing the most peculiar thing. He started just brushing stuff off his shorts onto the ground, and then he went like that with his foot. And he was killing ants, little ants that were crawling up his legs. I was an environmentalist before I got to Ananda. And I just went, what? I went on total tilt. It was like a Zen koan, like, what is happening? And my brain just went out into outer space. But then after it was over, his energy was incredible. And I wanted to stay around, and so I committed myself to staying, even though that was the weirdest experience I had ever had. And he never did it again, ever. I must have seen him hundreds of times, not once. So I think it was this little test to see if I was serious about staying, and I was. I'm not certain I would have stayed if David didn't also stay, but there you have it. I was glad that I did. So a couple other stories along those lines. One of the things that Swami trained me in often was to put out more energy and to be more conscious. And I'm sure those are lessons for all of us in different stages of our lives. Those were particular things he worked with me on. I had a lot of energy, but I apparently didn't have enough energy or enough focus. So he really worked hard to draw those qualities out of me more. And one of them was he called me into his office once to explain an incredibly complicated legal thing. We were just getting started with a lawsuit process with SRF. So nothing had really happened, but it was right at the very beginning of letters starting to go back and forth. And he asked me to come to his office, and he said, I'd like to talk to you about what I'm thinking about this case. And I'm thinking, why? Not a lawyer. I don't know anything about this stuff. But I think he needed a neutral party just to talk out loud a little bit. So I came in, and he started talking about this whole detailed. In fact, interestingly, he could perceive all of the different elements of the case as it unfolded over the next 12 years. Only in retrospect, did I realize that. But so I started to take notes, which is what I usually do. Writers take notes. And immediately he said, Karen, put that down, put that pencil down and listen. I put the pencil down and I listened, and he stuffed legal concepts into my brain for 30 minutes. I'm not a legal person. David would have been much better in that room, but he didn't have the training that I needed. So I listened and listened and listened, and I was just like practically ready to explode. I wanted to remember later what he said, but I was bereft of my pen. So we finished. He said, thank you. I left, and I felt like I just had the biggest meal you could imagine. And I just ran to my office, which is about, 100 feet away, and I started typing as fast as I could, which I'm sure was cheating, but at least I had notes about what we talked about. But it was an exercise in listening, wake up, listen, pay attention. Another sort of a related test, this was about being confident in yourself and having courage. And this was kind of a simple test in a way. I was in his living room with a longtime musician. Swami had just written a revision to one of his songs, and he changed the note. And he said, now, what was that note? What did I change it to? And the person sitting in the room said, oh, you changed it to an E. And I thought, that's not what you changed it to. It was an F. And so I'm usually reasonably outspoken, and I said, I think it was an F. And the other person who'd been super involved in the music for 1,000,000 years and was very capable, top of the line, and I was a newbie, said, no, it was an E. And I thought, oh, now what? I was sure that it was an F. So I said, well, I really think it was an F. Well, this goes back and forth for a while. And finally, the last iteration was, sir, I'm afraid it was an F. That was my final comment. I just was willing to, I must have said it, this was the 4th round. And Swami smiled and he said, don't be afraid to speak up when you're right. It was an F. The whole thing was just a setup, just to see if I would stand up for myself. And I'm happy to report that I did. So, and there were lots of times when we needed to do that later on. So I think he wanted to find out whether I was the kind of person who would just go along with the crowd or whether I was willing to be strong in myself. Somebody once interviewed Swami and said, what is the best yoga posture? And he said, to stand on your own 2 feet, which is a beautiful and interesting answer. And so much of the training that he gave was in directions like that. Another interesting training that he gave in the area of courage was that for no reason that we can discern, he invited us to a meeting of educators to learn about this new book that he had written called Education for Life. So this was in the late 70s, or late 80s rather. And it was all of our teachers, our well-known teachers, all got together. And Asha and David and Jyotish and Devi were there also. And us. We'd been in the community, a couple of years? You know, two jokers and the real deal. We're all in the room. We were thrilled. How great. We had 3 solid days with Swami, morning into the late afternoon, where everybody was talking through the book and Swami was elucidating and expanding on the ideas. I have all the type notes from that. It was not recorded. It was a wonderful and interesting session. At the end, and this was why we were invited, at the end he looked around the room and he said, well, everyone here is already very busy teaching. But David and Karen are free players. I'd like you to go out and lecture and teach professional teachers all about these concepts, education for life. What? Are you kidding me? It's unbelievably off the wall, out there idea. So it was like, are you kidding me? And as I'm shy about speaking, as you can see, this is not my favorite thing to do. And David had not ever done any public speaking before. This was new for him too, even though we found out later he's a great public speaker. So my part was to figure out how to go find some teachers to speak to. Who would want to hear from us, for heaven's sakes? Totally ridiculous idea. We didn't know anything about what we're talking about. So David was talking about the necessity to take a step and listen and take another step and listen. So that's what I did. And I drove down to Sacramento to the nearest big library, and I thought, let's get a big set of yellow pages and look for schools and places to talk about. I mean, it was like, I don't know, where do you start with something like that? Add to that I was about 26 years old, and I looked it and not dressed very well. So here I am, I'm in Sacramento, I'm driving around looking for a library, very pre-internet days, and I happened to pass the State Department of Education building, and I thought, hey, that's a big building, maybe they got a library in there that's education-oriented, all right. So I parked the car across the street, got a ticket for jaywalking, which was a lot of money in those days. And I thought, well, that's not a great start, but here we go. Into the building I went and looked around, and I walked into the first office that I saw and said, hey, do you have a library? And he said, yeah, it's upstairs. What do you need? What are you doing? And I explained what I was doing, and he was all strangely interested. And he was talking to me, tell me more about this wonderful thing that you're doing. And I'm just, and okay, great. And he said, okay, so the library is just upstairs. So I'm starting to leave his office, and this woman walks in, and she asks me also what I'm doing, and suddenly is strangely interested in education for life. And I told her, we're going to look for some conferences where we can speak. And she said, I'm organizing a conference that you could speak at for teachers in California. And I'm just thinking, what is going on? And really, I looked like a zhlub, if you know the Yiddish word, just a high school kid, badly dressed. And she said, yeah, we'd like you to speak at our conference. Believe it or not, we were invited to speak at her conference, and we went a month or two later, and we did it. So all I can possibly say is that is an example of how Swami animated us behind the scenes to make things happen, Swami and Master, if we cooperated with the flow of energy. And miraculously, it was a well-received talk. So a strange adventure. And it would have been very easy, extremely easy, to have said, no way am I going to say yes to that. it would have been extremely easy. In fact, even now, I am amazed that I did that, anything related to that. So, and all that to also say that when there's an opportunity to just move your energy in a direction that you feel a little wind in your sails from Master, open yourself to the grace and see where it takes you, because you just never know. What's that beautiful quote? There, many beautiful things in this world are left undone for lack of a willing channel, which is a very interesting idea. So we didn't do it. God did it through us. Then I also received a lot of training in, how can I characterize this? I would just call this a test. Is there a crack in that pot? Do you know that story? Right? There's Namdev. There's that. When the guru tests you to see whether there's a crack in your pot. This is a very good one that I got. There was a person at Ananda village that I worked with for many years who was difficult. We had difficult people. We had wonderful people. We had a whole range of people. This was an amazingly difficult person for me to work with. And he ended up leaving the community, which delighted me. I was thrilled. So some years later, Swami invited us to take a drive with him into Assisi. And I thought, great, rare opportunity. We said, yes, we'd love to drive with you. We get in the car and he's driving into Assisi. This was when Swami himself was driving, and he's chatting away on irrelevant, not very interesting topics. And then all of a sudden, he brings up this person who had left Ananda, and he said, so-and-so, if he ever came back to Ananda, I know that we would all welcome him back with open arms. And then he stopped talking. And a silence fell on the car. And David knew just exactly how I was feeling, so he just allowed me to have the test. And the silence extended longer. And in my consciousness, I said, Swami, I could not welcome him back. I'm sorry, but I want to be honest with you. As soon as I said that mentally, Swami just changed the subject and chattered away about something else. But there was a crack in that pot. And I noticed, and I'm not ashamed of having been honest with him because I felt that way, but it was interesting to me. He even just could read my thoughts. So it was a very gentle tap to see what was happening. This was a good test. I dropped out of choir, which might surprise you. I was singing at the village for a little while, and it wasn't that fun for me for some reason. It's probably more fun to direct than it is to sing in a choir. Just there were reasons. And Swami called me to his office, and he said, I hear you're not in choir. And I thought to myself, how would you know or even be interested in such a thing? But he did know, and it was interesting to him. And he said, why are you not singing anymore? And I said, well, I don't really like singing under so-and-so. And he said, is it because you think you know more than they do? And I said, no, it's because I think they're a prima donna, which is true, actually. And he said, oh, great. And he was relieved that it wasn't the other reason. And then I realized, well, thinking you know more than somebody is a greater sin than, minor annoyance with personality. That was an interesting lesson. And he wanted to know. That was important to him. Another experience that I had that was a little related to that, this was more maybe about, this was an attunement issue for me that I was unaware of. So this was very interesting. While I wasn't singing in choir, I got involved singing in another group that was enjoying singing classical music. And they were all former professional singers often, or highly skilled singers. So we would just read Mozart, Brahms, Beethoven. We'd sight read music together and sing, and it was fun. And one day, Swami called me to his office, and he said, "I hear you're singing with a little group that's doing this other music." And I was surprised he knew, and I said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Is it not okay to sing classical music?" And he said, No, it's fine. I love classical music. I listen to it all the time. I'd rather you not sing with them." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I'd rather not say. I'd just rather you not sing with them." And I thought, Swami has asked me about 3 things in my whole life. This is pretty small potatoes. I should say yes. I don't know why. It was heartbreaking because I was having a lot of fun. But I thought, I came here to grow and to change. I'm going to say yes to this. It's a small thing. And within a year, every person that I had been singing with had left Ananda. Wow, how interesting. He spotted danger, and he wanted to just save me from attuning myself with people who were gradually going to end up leaving. But he could read everybody's consciousness. But he also didn't want to say anything not nice about those other people, and he didn't. So that was an interesting lesson. I had some character flaws that Swami identified out loud for me. I put them in the book. Intellectual pride was one of them. I think I was just too confident in my own ideas. And he wanted to loosen their grip a little bit. And so he enjoyed, how would I characterize it? He enjoyed it if I could make some mistakes in public and that he could comment on them, so that it would just loosen my confidence in my own opinions and etc. You remember when Yukteswar commented when Yogananda walked across the stage and tripped a little on a carpet, and Yukteswar said in front of everyone, "You oaf." I had some of that from Swami, and it was good for me because it helped to just humble me a little bit in ways that I think that are beneficial for me in particular. So we put on the Peace Treaty, which is a play Swami wrote. This was the first iteration of it, and most of us read from a script, but I memorized my lines, and I didn't have that many, so I was all excited. I had my lines memorized. And I think I forgot 2 of them, but it wasn't an emergency because nobody had to go right afterwards, if you know what I mean. It didn't affect my fellow players. So it was a wonderful experience. We all had so much fun. Afterwards, Swami came up on stage right at the end of the play. "Oh, congratulations, everybody. That was so wonderful." And then he turned to me and he said, "You forgot a line." With so much pleasure. A big smile. He loved it. In a similar vein, he had just written a new piece of music for the oratorio, and he invited, would anyone like to come up and sight read this? And I said, yeah, I love sight reading. I'm a great sight reader. I could read just about anything, no problem. And so I came up, and oh my God, so simple. And he said, "Okay, sing it." And I sang the first 3 notes wrong. And I just thought, what did I just do? And he said, "That was wrong." And there were like 300 people in the room listening, and it was like, okay, it was wrong. Good, you oaf, got that. So I didn't have much of a ripple, but boy, I was sure surprised I forgot that. Maybe he even just cast a spell on me so that I wouldn't do it right. But I had numerous opportunities like that to have my reactive process tested. And one of the things that I actually value the most about yoga as a path and our whole teaching. One of the pieces of it that I love the most is just practicing to not react, or to react minimally, when stuff happens. And so I was glad to have those experiences and kind of as a test. How did I do? Ooh, scale 0 to 10, that was good. That was about a 9. Or, oh my God, I was mortified. That was about a 1. But Swami gave us lots of opportunities to test that, and life gives us lots of opportunities to test that. Our Comcast went out this morning at about 10:30, and I went through 3 modems, 2.5 hours of online stuff, and 2 tech support guys who physically came out, and it didn't get finished till half hour before we got here. So 10 till then, and I was really good reactivity until like the last hour and a half. So about a 9, and now about a 2, right about in the last. But life, it's fantastic. You could hundreds of those a day usually, so you don't have to have known Swami to have a chance to practice that stuff. One of the interesting stories that was an example of how Swami worked with us, how did he train us, was he had bought a new computer, and he had brought it home, and he asked a couple people to help him set something up and learn how to work with it. So this was great. I was third in line, so I got to watch this process. The first guy came over, and Swami was kind of typing, and Swami said, "It's not working. Could you tell me how, what's wrong or how to fix this?" And the person kind of pushed Swami over and started typing and said, "It's like this, And Swami said, "Oh, you mean like this?" And Swami came back and just typed really fast, and the person was so frustrated. It said, "No, it's like this." Oh, so that was a disaster. Computer was worse than ever. Swami was just confused and not happy. And so this person walked away annoyed because Swami wasn't getting it. So the second person comes, and they try kind of a different strategy, but it's essentially still the same, here's how you do it kind of a thing. So that didn't go very well either. So I'm the third in line. I got to do a different way. So I came over. Yeah, he said, "Karen, can you help me?" I wasn't sure if I could help him, but I knew I could do this differently. So I said, "What are you trying to do?" And he said, and I said, "Well, you want to try," and I described it, and I let him do it. And he did it perfectly because he's perfectly capable on the computer. And then he said, "Well, how about this?" And I said, "Well," and then the same. But I let him do it, and hands off. Leave him some space to do it in his own way. And we finished, and it was great, and he was happy, and he wandered away. And I realized afterwards that was the way he always works with us. He was so careful to not push. He just never pushed on anybody. You had to want to receive training from him before he would even suggest anything. And often he would be so understated you might not know what he was telling you. So he's extremely careful not to push people. And that's a very beautiful attitude for if you're training, teaching, coaching, leaving people space to grow in their own way without pushing. It's so natural to want to push a little bit if you feel like somebody is not getting it or not understanding you. So he was amazing at leaving people space. Okay, just 2 little short ones, and then I'll pass it on to my wonderful partner. A friend was going into town to a coffee shop with Swami, and he said, "So where shall we go?" And she said, "Oh, any place except that one place where they don't like us. There's one owner of a coffee shop, and they don't like us at Ananda. They've been really negative to us." And Swami said, "Okay." So they drive into town, and I think he was driving, and he drove right to that coffee shop. And he walked in happily and sat down, and he did not allow himself to be affected by anyone's opinion of him. He was loving. They could hate him. He would love them back. And that was a beautiful story. I love that. It was discomforting for his partner, but... And then, let's see, my last little bit I'll read. Oh yeah, this is beautiful. So this is for all of us. Since he's not in the body right now, he is still with us energetically. Somebody wrote a book interviewing many community leaders about their early years at Ananda. Many people mentioned receiving major assignments from Swami and then being left on their own to figure out how to implement them. And it could really feel that way, like this Education for Life assignment. Swami never checked in with us. You could definitely feel like you were way out in outer space. When Swami read the book, he clarified, "I did not leave you alone. My consciousness was always with you. My way is to project my thoughts. Those who are receptive and want to be in tune will be guided. A true teacher won't impose. You have to reach out for it. People say that I never give them advice. I do give advice, but I hint. People hear what they want to hear." Yeah. So, and I think he and Master both are always doing that even right now. So if we just keep our antenna up and take a step at a time, like David was saying, that energy and guidance can come to us in a big way now also. Okay. Oh, good. Good. Reluctant speaker.
Yeah. I may be able to speak, but I'm incompetent putting on earpieces. Okay. I want to expand a little bit on a few things that she mentioned, just different stories, like about EFL. The idea is to say yes. And saying yes is not with the mouth. Saying yes is with the heart. To just say yes, but be resisting internally is not really saying yes. Okay, cute little story. So I'm an outward kind of guy. So I wound up being at a number of Ananda events around the country where we would have a booth. They used to be called the Whole Life Expo. Now I think they're called New Living Expos. So we're in New York. Swami's going to be one of the main speakers. We have the Ananda booth. Swami wanders over and says, "Here's a stack of flyers announcing that he's speaking. Why don't you go out in the aisle and stand there and give them to people?" And I'm like, oh. So we live in our likes and dislikes. We live in our preferences. Master had just asked me to do this. Why am I feeling no? So I really got my energy up, and I actually got to the point where I was almost willing. But I did. So I took the stack of flyers, and I went out into the aisle, and it felt like each flyer weighed about 9 pounds. So I'm kind of like, oh. And somebody is walking by slowly, fortunately, and I said, "Swami Kriyananda is speaking here tomorrow." And the guy says, "Really? I've always wanted to hear him speak. That's great." And he takes the flyer. And now I feel lighter. You see how conditioned we are by the circumstances? Why does that matter? Because he had a favorable thought about me? What are we here for? We're here to find God. The saying in India, if the whole world reviles you, but your guru is pleased, you've done well. And if the whole world is falling at your feet and the guru is displeased, no good. So I really noticed, gosh, this is so much easier now that someone liked what I was doing. And then I a little bit even chastised myself. Why does that matter? What's wrong with it? Okay, but anyway, I did feel lighter, to be fair. And the stack was at least one flyer lighter, but it felt a lot lighter. So then the next person walks by, and I'm feeling a little better, and I said, "Swami Kriyananda," and she says, "Really? I've always wanted to hear him speak." And I'm thinking, this is nuts. But now I can't wait. It's like I'm going to be tackling people in the hall, and And so I'm really feeling like this. And I get up there, and I'm ready to and the guard comes by. and says, you can't hand flyers out in the aisle. You're blocking traffic. Do it from your booth. And I said, okay. So I go back to the booth, and Swami comes by. And he says, he didn't say anything, but he's just looking at me like, didn't I ask you to? And I said, oh, sir, I'm so sorry. The guard said I can't do that. And he said, okay, never mind. And he walked away. It's never about the flyers. Swami said once at some big gathering, must have been an SRW, about 300 people in the audience or something, he said, you people have it easy. And I thought, what's he talking about? He said, Master never explained anything. He would just put you in a situation, and there you were. He said, maybe I explained too much. I think I needed too much explanation. It really still wasn't all that much. But, okay. Then the other one I wanted to mention, just to start, you never really knew what was going on. Anaya talked about Swami didn't want to interfere with you. You know, touching a hot stove, you learn from touching a hot stove. Your mom can tell you 600 times, don't touch the stove. You touch it once, you've learned. So Swami would allow us into situations. And there was an image I heard once at the village. I don't remember whose it was, but it always stuck with me. You're there doing a little project, and Swami's there. And you say, sir, can you hand me a board? So he hands it to you. Can you hand me the other board? So he hands it to you. And you put them up like this. Can you hand me another board like this? Can you hand me that rope? Oh, sure, he hands you the rope. Sir, how do you tie a noose? And he tells you. You're just about to stick your head in there, and he says, are you sure you want to do that? But you see what I mean? He lets the whole process go because we're supposed to learn. We're not here to build buildings. We're not here to hand out flyers. We're not here to sing songs. We're here to find God. And the only way to do that is to purify, forgive me, the junk in our own spine. That's what we're trying to do. And we tend to do that situationally. That's why we keep coming back. Because we do it situationally. I'll never forget that situation with the flyers. You could have said that to me all day long. And you think that's an interesting story. But when someone's speaking, for example, like this or at a Sunday service, it's the stories you remember for years. So our whole life around Swami was a story. It was always stories. You were always in some situation with this weird thing happening, and it would stick with you and you would really reflect on it. Now, the important thing to really remember is Master is in charge. This really very little had anything to do with Swami personally. And every one of us in our lives, Swami is no longer in the body, but in a very important sense. See, I feel like I was a little dense. I needed the words to come out of his mouth. Then I could get it. But for the rest of us, we have the opportunity to be tuning into that. You're in situations, every one of us is situations all day long. All day long. And in every single situation, Master is speaking to us. Every one. And the question is whether we're listening. Sometimes I feel like the whole path of yoga, we walk around with our fingers in our ears. And then we say, gosh, I never hear Master's voice. I never know what's going on. The entire path of yoga is to just do this. Get the fingers out of the ears. Then God is always whispering to us. And one of the things about being with Swami is you knew it. So you're on high alert all the time. Your energy didn't flat. You wanted to hear every word. You know what I mean? I think it's why people like sports. Because when you're playing sports, you're in the present. What does it mean to be in the zone in sports? You don't know the score. You don't hear the crowd. You're not anywhere. You're right there. If you're thinking about lunch, if you're an athlete and you think about, you're playing tennis, you think about that point you missed 10 minutes ago, you're a lousy tennis player. So when we were around Swami, we had this enormous incentive to be completely present. And I'll tell you, it was tiring at the end of the day. You know, to be on red alert the whole time. And if you fuzzed out, he looked right past you. When my energy was off and I said something to him, he looked right through me. One of the little stories in the book, I was walking to the Crystal Hermitage, and I knew there wouldn't be that many of us there, and, you know, it would be this nice opportunity to spend a little time with Swami. And I got into a weird space in myself. I was pretty careful with this, but I didn't get it right. I sort of enjoyed the fact that I got to hang out with Swami a little bit. And I kind of, I enjoyed that fact a little bit. Every time Swami saw me, it was pretty much the same greeting. David, nice to see you. So glad you could make it. Okay. So I walk into the hermitage. Swami would stand at the entrance greeting people mostly, just saying hi. And I walk in and I'm waiting for that. And he looks right past me, doesn't say a word, and just walks right past me. And I was shocked because I hadn't noticed. But when I got home that evening, I really meditated on it. And I thought, ego and pride. The next time I saw him, David, so good to see you. So glad you could make it. Now, how does he know that stuff? That's kind of weird if you think about it. I mean, I didn't have a big button and say, look how great I am. But he could just tell. Master can tell too. And we really need to, Swami said it's almost easier for us because when you were with Master, it was too easy to confuse the person and the personality with the guru. And there's some truth to that with Swami also. In certain ways, we can really tune into him and to Master more easily because he won't get confused. I would see Swami eating lunch, and it was hard not to think he was just a guy eating lunch. Excuse me. Anyway, I want to just pause for a minute because, we've shared all kinds of stories and things, and I want to ask for questions. Because my hope through an evening like this is that each of us here can really understand on a slightly deeper level both who Swami was and what to carry in our heads to take maximum advantage of the fact that this great soul incarnated for our benefit. So let me just ask, if people have any thoughts or questions about anything either from the book or anything that's come up so far tonight, does this sort of make sense to people? Kind of how we doing? Anything you've ever wondered? Yeah, please.
No.
Yes.
So Anaya mentioned the lesson about learning to stand your ground. It was an F, and I knew it was an F. But if I did that, it might have looked really different. Get off. You don't have to always be right. And how do you know the difference when you're standing in the middle of doing it?
That is a great question. The question is always a question of consciousness. It's not about whether you stand your ground or don't stand your ground. You can, like Master said about if you're late for an appointment, run. You can run calmly or you can run nervously. That's the issue. So are you standing your ground because you're standing your ground? Or are you really listening and Master is suggesting that you stand your ground? So the question is whether it's coming from ego. Where is that coming from? Is it, Anaya said she could be a little proud and a little overconfident, if that's where it's coming from. But the question is always the consciousness in terms of getting guidance, like we talked about a little bit before. If I'm in a complicated situation and I'm trying to hear what Master wants me to do, my first step, the work I do internally, is to get neutral. To get neutral. If I came up to you and said, don't you love this shirt? Don't you love this shirt? I just bought it, isn't it? What are you going to say? Yeah, it's a nice shirt. But if I came up to you and I said, I just bought it yesterday, I kept the receipt, I'm not sure it's my color. What do you think? You're more likely to give me a true answer. Okay. People sometimes pray like this. Dear Master, I'll do anything you want, but not tomorrow. I am so busy tomorrow. If you only knew how busy. But you see what I mean? So where is it coming from? Is it our own likes and dislikes? Is it personal? Once you get your ego out of the way, if you really feel you're right, say it. And you can still be wrong, but it's not about being right or wrong. Are you doing it purely? Or are you doing it because you can't admit you're wrong? You're very proud of yourself. You're trying to show off. Does that make some sense? That's how you can tell the difference. Now, is it easy to tell the difference? No. I explained before, even Swami was careful with his guidance. But every step is a step. So again, for me, my work is, I'm a do it now kind of guy. I mean, if something needs to happen, just do it. So sometimes I'll be in some difficult situation, or sometimes I have to speak to someone. And I could feel my heart's not right. And I'll say, I need to talk to so-and-so. And the next day, Anaya will ask me, did you speak to him? No. Why not? 3 days later, did you speak to him? No. I'm cooking. I'm doing the inner work till I get, as best I can. It's not like I never blow this either. But I'm doing the inner work as best I can to get to a point where I'm neo-neutral. Now, do I still feel like I need to speak to that person? And if I speak to them, they'll feel, to some degree at least, they'll feel like I'm not doing it because I'm annoyed. I'm doing it because I think it's the right thing to do. And they may still resist, but it's a very different flavor. So I would say the same thing about standing your ground. Why are you standing your ground? Are you that certain? Are you afraid to be wrong? Are you afraid to look foolish? I mean, there's that one story in the book. I mean, one of Ananda's very senior people said to me, if Swami had said that to me, I'd have turned into a pillar of salt. There's a story in the book where I asked a question and I knew, see, I didn't listen to that voice. 250, maybe 300 people in here. And Swami says, does anyone have a question? Raise my hand. And I asked my question and I knew it wasn't the right question to ask. When you ask a question in a situation like that, you're not asking for yourself. You're not asking because you're interested. It's okay if you're interested. But there's 250 people here who never have a chance to be with Swami. Are you contributing to that joint satsang energy or not? That's what's important. And my question was an extremely interesting question, but was not right. So Swami said, sir, what about, he said, that is a stupid, useless question. Next. For a moment, honestly, and this was good. A crack in the pot, I got lucky. For a moment, I was a little, and then I just smiled. I don't know, I figured, even if the guru kicks you, at least he's thinking about you. And then as I thought about it later, I thought maybe it was also a test for everybody here. I think it probably was. Because about 4 of my friends came up to me afterwards and said, are you okay? Someone actually, he called it a stupid, useless question. Somebody came up and said, oh my God, he said your question was useless. I said, he did not. He said it was useless and stupid. Don't forget the stupid part. So anyway, I hope that answer is somewhat helpful. Other questions or thoughts for people? Well, I have to say, there was a little bit of a chill in the room. But someone actually did. They were smarter than me, though. He didn't chastise anyone else. Yeah, Esther? Hang on one sec. No, just for the...
You were going to tell me don't talk.
What a terrible question, Esther.
It's not a question, but it's a comment, but it's very
please.
related. I have in my altar, I have a picture of Swami and a picture of the Guru. And very, very often, I have what you have said today, but without words. There is times that I go through and I see Swami and I can feel his smile talking to me.
That's sweet.
And he's already telling me, good job.
That's very sweet.
And there is other times, and it happened the same with Master, that I go and say, am I doing a good job? The face is completely different. It's almost like, shut up and keep going. Like, this is about your ego. What do you want from me today? And other times, it's like, wow, you're talking to me. You're telling me when I need it. So I feel,
That's very sweet.
Without words, but I feel like he tells me, go, go and check on yourself. And when it comes like that thought that you had or what happened today was really coming from here.
Very sweet.
So it's very
Thank
beautiful that you shared that.
I have a slightly similar thing. I feel like I can feel Master smiling when I'm getting it right. Like you ever walk into a room and you kind of feel like, I don't think I belong in here. Do you know what I mean? It's just this uncomfortable feeling. Or you get into some room and you go, oh, this feels like home. I try as best I can to live in that all day long. You know, I'm an analytical guy. I mean, I have spreadsheets and all that stuff I do. But I try very much to live my life very intuitively. Moving here from the village was guidance. I'm a business coach in part, right? Here's a great idea. Move to the most expensive place in the United States with no job, very little savings, and no experience and no credentials, and start a public speaking business. If someone come to me and said that, I would have said, go take a cold shower. You're out of your mind. But it's what Master wanted us to do. I could feel it. So we moved. It was 30 years ago and started Clarity Seminars. One little story about that, and then I'll come back for more questions if there are questions. Everyone is individual. And Swami had an incredibly good sense of knowing when to support and when to push. Okay? I got this hit to start Clarity Seminars. I went to speak to Jyotish. Jyotish encouraged. I spoke to a number of people. Everyone encouraged. Swami never said a word. Just never said a word. I knew that he didn't feel no, or I wouldn't have gone, but he just didn't want to engage on it. So we moved down here. It is the hardest thing I've ever done. I called every single company in the entire San Francisco Bay Area pitching Clarity Seminars. I mean, that's nuts. 6 hours a day on the phone just to get that thing off the ground. It was a lot of work. No word from Swami. Clarity Seminars is starting to pick up. We're doing pretty well. It feels solid now. Someone from Italy sends me an email. You should hear what Swami just said. And I thought, what did he say? And I got the tape. This is a long time ago, but I got the tape. And he said, I hear my Clarity Seminars in California is doing well. And I thought, your Clarity Seminars? You never even mentioned the damn thing to me. What do you mean, your Clarity Seminars? But then I realized, see, early on, if he had said, I'm happy you're doing this, I would have died doing it. I would have just done it. And if we went broke, we went broke. And he knew that. So he didn't say anything. I had to find the strength to do it. I had to ask mentally him and Master if this was supposed to happen. Isn't that interesting? 2.5 years. It took a long time for me to really get that because it took a while to really get solid. And once it got solid, that's when he said that in Italy. And part of me, you know how much I loved him and respect him, but part of me was like giving him one of these. Are you kidding? Well, oh, yeah. He did say one thing as we left the village. He said, I wish you success. He looked at you, though. He didn't look at me. He said, I wish you success. And by success, I mean have fun. And then he left. So that was the big instruction, have fun. And, working 12 hours a day for 9 cents an hour didn't feel like all that much fun, but fair enough. Yeah. Other questions or thoughts about anything that we've touched on? Okay. Do feel free. If something occurs to you as I'm chatting, just put a hand up. But I have some other stories. Oh, we're doing good. I have some other stories that I'll share. But, no, I think I can see this without my glasses. Yes, another miracle. One of the stories that I really enjoyed. Swami was always dealing with our consciousness individually. Even in a group, things that would happen for a reason. It was never about the thing. Do you know what I mean? So for a long time at the village, for years, there'd be a little group with Swami, 6, 10, 14 people, that kind of thing. And you'd be traveling often because he was speaking around the country. And he'd say, let's go out to dinner. And everyone would panic. Because Swami would not go to McDonald's. Now, he wouldn't go to a 5-star place. That's ridiculous. But he would go to a nice restaurant. And people were broke in those days. People are earning $4 an hour in the garden. And so everybody got incredibly tense. And people would drop back. Like Swami was here, and there were people like this. And then the people in the back are, you have an extra $3? Everybody's figuring out how they're going to do this. Every time. So you were really torn. You really wanted to be with him. but, ouch, in the wallet. And it would be very easy to think, what's he doing? I mean, he knows nobody has any money. Okay. So we're with him. There's about 6 of us maybe. We're with him in New York at one of the New York expos. And it's time for break. We're setting up the booth and all that. Let's go out for, I don't remember, his lunch or dinner, doesn't matter. Let's say dinner. Let's go out for dinner. So we all go, and we pass a pretty nice restaurant. We say, what about that? He says, nope, too expensive. Never have I heard that come out of Swami's mouth. But okay, fine. Then we go to another place. It's down, a fair bit from them. How about this one? Nope, way too expensive. I'm thinking, what? What space alien kidnapped my Swami and substituted this person, Finally, we pass a place that had seen better days. The tablecloths were like those plastic red and white squares. It was shoddy with those really sort of smoky little lights in the middle. It was awful. Swami said, oh, perfect. And I thought, this is nuts. This is a dump. The food actually was acceptable. Okay, fair enough. Now, what the tradition always was, let's say there's 11 of us with Swami. So 11 of us and Swami. We would divide the bill, and each of us would pick up Swami's part. Okay? So we would divide his into 11, and everybody would just pick, so he didn't have to pay. So we're in there, and we're all figuring that's going to happen. I'm already stunned that we're in this dumpy place. And Swami says, it's on me, and grabs the check. I'm thinking, what? What is the deal? I really don't understand this. And then I looked around the table. No one at that table had any issues with money. Everybody was clean. I knew these people. It's not that they were wealthy. You can be wealthy and still have problems with money. But their energy around money was clean. There was poverty consciousness at Ananda Village. Everybody at the village was broke, felt broke. There was some aura of spirituality about being broke. That's part of why Swami built Crystal Hermitage. It's beautiful. He was really making that point. So with this particular group, there was no reason to go to an expensive restaurant. Why waste the money? Nobody there had an issue with money. The next day, 3 more people showed up from California. Suddenly we're back to fancy restaurants. Isn't that interesting? Now, I don't think, I wouldn't know, but I don't think he planned that. Again, I think he did what Master told him to do. I don't think he thought, oh, these people have poverty consciousness, I need to take them to an expensive restaurant. I don't buy it. I guess it's conceivable, but I don't buy it. He just did what Master told him to do. But it's a great story. So he was our best friend. He is our best friend. It would take a really good friend to know you well enough to do that for you. We've got kinks in our spine. We've got kinks in our consciousness. And Swami's only job was to help you with that. In the old days, many years ago at the village, life is a little more complicated. Someone would come. Let's suppose someone would come and their career before they got to the village was as a plumber. Swami wouldn't let them do plumbing because they just get back in their old patterns. So he'd have you do a new thing. On the negative pole, what's the first thing they tell you if you're trying to get over alcohol? Don't go back to your old drinking buddies. You go back to your old drinking buddies, you're going to... So Swami didn't want you to just come to the village and immediately click into all your old patterns. So often, saints make life uncomfortable. You never knew what the heck was going on, but at least it kept you awake. And then a couple of stories I wanted to share. Oh, there it is. About just things that were just so sweet. We were flying over to Italy, and I was very careful around Swami. I never wanted it to be personal. And whenever, he'd be here and he'd be blessing people and I'd be in the back of the room, I felt blessed I had as much contact with him as I did. It's not about me. Great, whatever I can draw spiritually is wonderful, but it's not about me. But I was walking over, I lived at the village, and I walked over the big hill between the village and Crystal Hermitage. So I'm walking over, and I excuse me, this was in a flight to Italy, my mistake. I'm on the flight to Italy, and it just sort of crossed my mind in a light way. I didn't focus on it. I kind of miss him. I just miss him. He's in Italy, and I don't see him anymore. And it just sort of went away. These thoughts come through. So we get to Italy, and we had arranged our flight to Italy to be at a hotel where he was speaking. So we get there, get our bags, put the bags down. The phone rings in our hotel room. And it's one of the people in one of Swami's helpers. And he says, Swami wants to see you. And I thought, that's weird. How does he even know we're here? So we go up. So we open the door to a suite, and there's about, 15, 18 people in there, something like that. And I walk in, and I stand in the back, which is what I always do. And Swami goes, oh, no. I want you right in front of me. So I sit right in front of him. And he spends the whole satsang. It was just informal. It was like 30, 45 minutes, though, talking to me. I'll tell you how many times that's happened to me. Oh, it's hard for me to say this without tearing up. How could he know that? That's just weird. I had that thought. I never had that thought. But I had it in the flight. And as soon as I landed, he called me and had me sit right here. That's incredible. Another story. This is just remarkably sweet. Was that same trip, I think, because we didn't get to do this very often with Swami, but we're all in Italy, and he says, hey, I have to go to town to do some errands. Would you be willing to come with me? And this is one of these, okay, if you insist. So, yes. So we get in the car. So we go to town, and Swami says, let's have a cappuccino, which is what you do in Italy. And we're, of course, yes, lovely, let's have a cappuccino. We'd been in town for maybe a minute and a half, but it's time for a cappuccino. So we go in, we go to the cafe, and we're sitting in the cafe. And this man comes in, and the guy was completely sort of ripped jeans. He had one of those flat cardboard boxes, kind of a low box, with a piece of string around his neck, and he's walking over like this, and he looked a mess, and everything's a mess. And he's got all kinds of little things in that box. He's clearly basically a beggar. And he walks over to our table, and he mutters in Italian. My Italian's okay, but it's not great. And he was not very articulate. But I could kind of tell, you want to buy one of these things. And I'm half ashamed to admit, I think it's natural, but I'm half ashamed to admit, my first thought is, go away. Go away. I'm here with Swami. Go away. But Swami turns to him and says, oh, what do you have there? And he starts looking through this little box of stuff. And it's just, and Swami picks out one of those little battery-operated hand fans, and a comb, and some kind of weirdo pen with an extra click button on it or something, I don't know. And Swami says, I'll take these. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? And he pays the man a few euros, and the guy says, and wanders off to the next table. And Swami turns to me, not Anaya, he turns to me and says, I always like supporting people who are trying to better themselves with dignity. Point well taken. I really got that wrong. And I was somewhat ashamed, but it was a very, very powerful and sweet lesson. Any other thoughts or comments? I have lots of stories. Oh, no, I've got, it's kind of a big book. I'm going to try and remember them now because I just wrote down a few. One which relates a little bit, Saranya, to what you were talking about how do you know when to do what, was chicken fights. Swami would invite people, there's a swimming pool at the Crystal Hermitage, and he would invite people over for the pool party. And at one point, I don't know how this started, but I think it must have been him because none of us would have done it. He said, let's do chicken fights. Now, I don't know if you know what a chicken fight is, but you're in the pool and the water's about this deep, and someone sits on your shoulders, all right? So there are two pairs. So there's someone here with someone on his shoulders and someone here with someone on his shoulders. Okay, so Swami gets on someone else's shoulders. So Swami's on the top, and this other guy's on the top. And the idea is to sort of grapple and throw someone off. Now, nobody wants to throw Swami into the water. So it sort of wasn't fair. So, the first one happens and Swami goes, and Swami was also very strong. In those days, he was very strong. This guy energized twice a day his whole life, and he was a rock. Okay, but anyway, so he throws this guy in the water. And then the next guy, okay, Swami says, who's next? And the next guy gets on. And nobody wants to throw Swami. It's his own pool, for gosh sakes, So he throws the next guy in. But then one of our longtime members gets on, and this guy is a do-it kind of guy. Incredibly exuberant and all of that. And so he gets on, and he throws Swami in 5 seconds, throws him head first right into the water. And Swami jumps up and says, that's what I like. Just do it with an open heart. Do what you're supposed to do. If Master wants you to yell at someone, yell. Don't yell because you're annoyed. That's not the issue. You yell because that's the only thing this person will hear. It's time to yell. If Master wants you to yell, you yell. If Master wants you to walk away, you walk away. Saying yes is in here, and then you do whatever you need to do. If it's to stand up, stand up. But if your habit is to stand up, you're not free. You're free when you have a choice. Do whatever you want in your life. If you do the wrong thing, you'll find out. But whatever you do, make it your choice. You're not doing it from compulsion. And if we get clear in our own spines and get rid of the likes and dislikes, everything we do is a choice. And that's great, because if you make the wrong choice, you'll touch the stove, you'll learn something. But if it's compulsive, we can't help it. And being around Swami, we just, like I said about sports, you were just working all the time to just pull in your own spine and be as open as possible. And sometimes it was tricky. That time, again, we were at the expo in New York. Swami would often go from California to New York for a thing, and then from New York to Italy. California straight to Rome is a long flight. So it made a lot of sense. So if he had something to do in New York, he would try. Okay. So we're in New York. It was Sony's 100th anniversary as a company. And they had just come out with this brand new, this little Sony Walkman. You know, those old things? It's like 8-track tapes now, I know. But back then it was a big deal. And it was expensive and it was fancy. And Swami, hard to tell how much was play acting, but he liked technology. He was always playing with gadgets and things. So he had this little set of headphones. And he put his music on the player. And for 2 days, he'd walk up to people and put the headphones on you and say, isn't that terrific? Isn't that great fidelity? And it really was. You know, back then, that was a pretty new invention, and it was fantastic. You felt like you were in a concert hall. Okay, this goes on for a couple days. Then he walks up to me, and he says, as you know, I'm leaving for Italy right after this event. And I have this Walkman, and I want to bring it to Italy, of course, but it looks a little delicate. But the case that came with it is this big case, and I don't have that much room. I don't really want to take the case. Do you think I need the case? And I learned, speak the truth. And I said, yes, sir. I think you do need the case. It's delicate. You just spent a lot of money on it. It's probably appropriate for you to take the case. And he sort of looks at me and says, oh. And he walks away. 4 minutes later, he comes up to me like he hadn't said a word. And he says, I'm leaving for Italy. And I have this Walkman. And it's got this big case. And I don't really want to take the case. But what do you think? And so you panic. And you think. So with a lot lighter energy, like I'm crossing a frozen pond trying to figure out what do I do, I said, yes, it looks kind of delicate and you just bought it yesterday and it's kind of expensive. I think probably it's good to take the case. And he looks at me and goes, oh, and he walks away. 4 minutes later, he's back. It's like, you're kidding me. And he says, like he'd never said anything. I'm leaving for Italy, and I've got this big case. And your mind is like Anaya said before, it's like a koan. It's like, what do you do with this? But I thought, well, let's try something else. I said, probably not. I don't think you need the case. And he goes, that's what I thought. And he walks away. Okay, so what's going on here? See, this is the thing. We get stuff like this all day long, and you just skate right past it. But when Swami's doing it, you think, what's going on here? It would behoove us to take every experience in our lives a little more seriously. But because it was him, I started, and I realized he's trying to tell me to tune into the person. Don't you, there's truth. He used to talk about truth with a small t. Truth with a small t is factually correct. Truth with a capital T is always kind and always takes the other person into account. If you know he doesn't want to hear it, what are you doing? You're going to cram it down his throat? That's just rude. And I paid no attention. I mean, this is like that other story. Anaya talked about education for life. Here we are with all these great souls and lifelong teachers. If you know the old Sesame Street game, one of these cars is not like the others. That's what we felt like. It's like, what are we doing here? Okay, another example. Swami had just written, or he just modified Crisis in Modern Thought, a very deep philosophical book. Okay, so he sends the manuscript out to Jyotish, Devi, Asha, Anandi, a couple of other, and me and Karen. And we're like, really, we've been in the village, what, a year? I mean, it's like, okay. And Swami says, I really want this book to make it in academia. I was a philosophy major. Maybe that was part of it, but I don't think so. But anyway, I really want this book to make it in academia. And it's a good book. I mean, it's very philosophically interesting. Please comment on it. So I think, I know how to do this. Honors philosophy at Swarthmore College. I used to dissect people's papers, no sweat. So I write him this enormous email. You know, this paragraph, this and this whole thing. A couple of days later, we get an email back. Karen, thank you so much for your comments. They were exactly what I was looking for. I really appreciate it. I took all of them. David, your comments were just absolutely useless to me. They would have required me to rewrite the entire book, which I have no intention of doing. Okay, now I've been at the village for 12 months. I'm thinking Swami is going to start a center in Irkutsk, Siberia, just so he can send me far away. But see, it's the same lesson. And then it came back, 25 years later. I wasn't paying attention to him. In my philosophy's honors classes, I was taught someone puts out an idea, and the idea is now on the table, and I take my scalpel and dissect it. But in reality, that idea is coming from a human being who may have personal interest in that idea. You see the difference? I wasn't taking... Now, Swami's feelings were not hurt. This was a lesson for me, okay? So it's not like I hurt his feelings as an author, but he was trying to tell me, hey, there's a person here. You've got to pay attention to the person. And this lesson, it was the same lesson with the Sony Walkman. All those years later, some of us are slightly more dense than others. And, I've sometimes said to people, I was in the early days, I was in the bottom 2% of Ananda people in this quality. Now I'm in the bottom 8%. Progress, okay? So we all come in with our stuff, and Swami would work with you in a way if you took it seriously. One of my very first meetings with him, I said to him, in fact, my first meeting with him, I said, sir, we were just at the village a little while, but I knew that place could help me find God. And I said, Swami, I truly believe Yogananda is self-realized. I can't tell you that I feel that he's my guru. I didn't know he wasn't my guru. I just didn't have an opinion yet. Sir, I know how deep a soul you are, but I can't tell you yet that I know that you're my teacher. I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to stay at Ananda Village under false pretenses. I would love to stay here, but I wanted you to know that. And he said, actually it was sweet, he said, I don't know you, he had just met me, but I know other people here who know you, and they seem to think you belong here, so it's okay with me. And shortly thereafter, I said, train me. I couldn't say what he said to Master. It's a different relationship. I want to be your disciple. But train me. He wouldn't do it if you weren't open to it. It's not his role to impose on you. So our work now, what are we hiding? What are we hiding? I accept the fact, honestly, that I'm a fool. Before Master, I'm a fool. What do I know? And I don't mean that in a negative sense. We're all fools. Master said we're all crazy. You hang around with other people who are crazy like you are, and then you think you're normal. But we're all crazy. It's like a third grader who makes a mistake on his math test and hides the paper under his desk so the teacher won't see. What are we doing? There's nothing to protect. Of course we have stuff. Of course I've got stuff. If you didn't have stuff, you wouldn't be on this planet. Yukteswar said, if you were too good for this planet, you would be gracefully adorning another. This is second grade, guys. This is basically a mental institution. And we all have issues. So just relax. Because it's that relaxation and not fighting what God is trying to tell us that opens the heart. And then we can all spend time with Swami. We can all spend time with Master. But it's in here, which is really the only place where it counts anyway. But it's just too easy. I've always marveled, and look, I'm the same way. I've said 6 times, I'm not perfect at any of this stuff. But I've always marveled. People move to Ananda, especially the village. And I only say that because there you really have to move to the land there. Here, you come Sundays kind of thing, okay? But if you're really committed, it's the same in both places. But it's easier in the city, right? The people we just see Christmas and Easter. Okay. But there, you're really committed. You give up your whole life. You quit your career. We moved into a teepee. You give up your whole life. You move there to change. But when someone points out something you need to change in yourself, you go, oh, no, that's not me. Interesting, isn't it? What are we protecting? There's nothing to protect. Master loves you. Master loves you. Relax. We're all on the same team. Even our Guru Bhais and friends here, we're all on the same team. We're just trying to find God. Everything else, all time is wasted that is not spent seeking God. We're so busy creating worlds in our minds and protecting this. And look, we live on a material plane. There's things to do. But are we doing it with the right heart? If you do it with the right heart, you get what you need. And if it's painful, bring it on. Bring it on. Let's get it over with. You know, and the things we reject. I mean, I do some financial counseling with people. It was so adorable. This woman came to me many years ago. She had just inherited some money. Not huge, but, you know, like $50,000. Real money, but not like she was set for life. And she said, I hate dealing with money. It was a thing for her. That stuck in your spine. But it was cute because I said to her, don't worry, soon your problem will be solved. A year later, it was all gone. Right? Swami said karma is not just wanting something, but rejecting it. They're both karma. We want to get to that neutral space. You're just living in here. What does Master want of me? That's the only relevant question. And there's such a freedom in that. We spend so much time avoiding this and chasing after this. And it's nice to put that stuff down eventually. But it's work and it's faith. But it's doable. And the goal is to make progress. It's not to get to some point. Then we just get discouraged. You know, one footfall in front of the other. Any last questions or thoughts about anything that we've touched on tonight? Please, Chandra. Oh, yes, let us do that. On, off, on. Great, thanks.
Did you feel like time was standing still and you didn't want to be anywhere else?
Yes and no. Definitely I didn't want to be anywhere else. I wouldn't say time was standing still. The days felt very full. I wouldn't say time was standing still. But, you know, if you're on red alert for an hour, you feel like you just spent 6 days, if you know what I mean. So your level of paying attention was greatly amplified because you didn't want to miss anything. And you figured, I mean, every look, Swami said Master could just look at him and go like this. And that would be food for thought for a year. So with that kind of paying attention and energy, I was spent at the end of the day, let's put it that way. And I never wanted to be anywhere else. It was so fun. And he was funny. The guy was just funny. You know, we had a big oratorio performance. We had done it many times at the village. And everybody just says, yay, you know, composer, composer. Swami runs onto the stage like this. And we were cracking up. I mean, that's adorable. He runs on like it just, you know, so stuff like that. So it was fun, too. It wasn't heavy. He was adorable. But everything was a lesson. And when you're in that space, you know, it takes energy. Is that helpful? Does that make sense? Well, I don't know. I can just say it. The question was, were the lessons always kind? Stupid, useless question is not so kind. Neither is your comments were completely useless. Oh, but here's one more story. I'll close with this that was so interesting. You talk about standing on your own 2 feet. Okay. Swami's writing a letter to SRF. Okay? Challenging letter. And once again, he sends it to Jyotish, Devi, Asha, you know, people, and me and Karen. And I don't know. I mean, I consider it a blessing. But it always struck me, like, does he actually care what I think? I think it's, as I said, I'm so pig-headed, he needed to give me extra juice. Okay. So he says, I've spent a lot of time on this letter. I sure hope I'm done. But if you have any comments, what do you think? I unfortunately had comments. Swami always talked about how important understatement was. Don't understatement is okay. So his letter starts out, and then suddenly there are sections that are underlined. And suddenly there are sections of the letter to SRF that are underlined and bolded. And now, in the next paragraph, it's underlined, bolded, and with lots of exclamation points. Okay. Then it's underlined, bolded, exclamation points, and italicized. Okay. So I'm reading this, and this is just not right. But then I reread his letter. He said, I sure hope I'm done with this. I really tried to get inside, and I got there, and I wrote to him. And I said, sir, as kindly as I could, I said, sir, you know, you've always talked about the value of understatement. It seems to me that this letter gets progressively stronger. So I'm sure so always take the hit, I'm sure I have something to learn here. If you could help me understand what you're doing, you know, da-da-da. Okay, fine. You don't say, how could you write such a letter? Okay. So he sends a letter back. It was incredibly sweet to everyone, including me, to the whole list of people. I really thought I was done with this letter. But the final comments from David Gammo proved to be very worthwhile, and I have now edited the letter based on those comments. And I thought, he didn't nail me this time. Okay. But then the rest of the letter said, there's a place in the AY where there's a little section where Master says, Swami cursed, where my father cursed in Hindustani. And it's like, you know how they do exclamation point, asterisk, question mark. So Swami cited that and said, I really think I'm done now. Remember that section where Master's father cursed in Hindustani? And I thought, okay, I'm not even going to read. But see, that's a really good example. He really said, I don't really want feedback. But I really felt like it was the right thing. And because my energy was right, he was receptive. The energy in that crisis correction was not right, nor was it in that question I asked. It's just what my energy wasn't right, and he slammed me. So is he always kind? No. But when he's not kind, I can see I deserved it. Fair enough. Okay, the question is, did I ever have an instance where I really felt my energy was right, but his response didn't seem to fit? I'll say no, not that I can remember. And if that ever happened, honestly, I would assume my energy wasn't as right as I thought it was. See, that's the issue. That's the crack in the pot. Where the way a potter tests a pot is to hit the pot. And if there's a crack in the pot, it goes instead of a nice pure tone. So I would trust him. See, that's the difference. I trusted him enough that if that happened, I'd think, see, I don't see it yet. And sometimes I could ponder those things for years. And maybe I never see it this life. But I bet he's right. He's smarter than I am. Anyway, Okay. I want to thank you all for coming. I hope that this was interesting and helpful. We have, yes, we have a couple.